to this day, and probably through the rest of my lifetime, and since humans have been walking the planet, it's humans engaging with humans. We're not yet to the point where your avatar and chatbot are engaging with my avatar and chatbot, right? We're not in the matrix yet. And that's the beauty of humanity. That's the beauty of sales and business, is that at the end of the day, it's still people engaging with people. And there's nothing less predictable than a human. Right?
Yep.
So the best we can do is try to apply a bit of a formula, a bit of science to the art of sales or the art of music.
We're always collaborating at all times with the universe.
All right, let's just roll with it. Let's see what happens, man. We're going
Hollywood.
Instead of going stereo, we're going mono. Do you remember, you're probably too young to remember when boomboxes and stuff had the stereo or mono switch.
Yeah. And so what's funny is I remember that switch, and I remember it sounding worse on mono and not understanding why. And so then, we're talking that's when I'm a kid, when I remember like the little slider knobs that like switch it between the two.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, or recently I discovered that when you're mixing and mastering music, they tell you to mix in both modes so that you can make sure that in the mono area of things, they weren't mixing for mono. Usually they were mixing for stereo. And so there's a lot of space in between there that gets lost if you don't have, if you're not listening to the mix in that mode too.
Yeah.
And so they found that like certain frequencies, it's better to put them in the middle, so that they kind of like sweep outward. So like your bass tones and like the things that kind of give body to things they'll put there. And then they won't be as prevalent in the stereo mix, but they are still in the stereo mix. So it's really weird how I've learned so much more about audio just from doing music. And then I've been able to cross apply that to like video production and everything else I've taken beyond from music, to photography and everything. And, did not expect that at all in the slightest. That was not something I saw coming. It just sort of is something how it is. Like you accrue knowledge just from like human experience and going out there and doing things.
That's how we accrue experience, by doing, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Certainly.
Well said.
Then Lawrence, I finally got you on the podcast. You were in the office for a while, and then you moved. So I don't see you anywhere near as frequently as
I'm in, I'm out. Yeah, it's I've been traveling a lot, which is a blessing.
What have you been doing?
Name it.
Have you been on like seminars and stuff like that? Traveling?
Yeah, traveling, going to client sites, doing speaking engagements, coaching sessions, going out on sales meetings with companies that just need help in the field. So
you just kind of audit
all
them?
of it.
Do you like go along and actually like help them nail the sale, or do you go out there? That would be kind of difficult, because I feel like you'd have to know like the ins and outs of whatever it is they're selling. But that is what you do. So I guess that's not like it's not a tall ask for you.
Well, for example, last week I went out with a sales rep who works for a technology company. He's responsible for all of their sales within certain industry verticals. Anyway, he'd been, and here's the fascinating thing, Johnny, and this is the world of sales. This young man, and I call him young because he's under 50, so he's younger than I, right? He'd been in this line of work, driving sales for this company for the last 10 years. 10 years. And he's doing a pretty good job. Over that 10-year span, how many times has a professional coach gone out in the field with him to see how he actually engages with customers?
Yeah, and audits like his sort of, what essentially is the customer's user experience with his company's sales.
Right. And how many times in the last decade do you think that's happened?
Oh, probably never.
Exactly.
You get hired for a position, they very seldom, and that's like the consulting world is getting large because of that, right? Because you've got the ability to take on people that are, if you see a lot of times people that come from like a Fortune 500 company higher up, they'll leave and then that's what they start doing is just consulting. So like, why would I can make whatever I want to make and help, hundreds of other companies every year, instead of being in one location, hitting this salary, only focusing on the same thing every day. You strike me as the kind of person who enjoys the benefit that comes from things kind of coming at you at all angles and in different ways, and having to sort of like decipher what's going to make that work. You got the energy for it, at least. So I feel like that's what I observe about your pattern or style of sort of sales. You're not conventional. I don't know if you've discovered
unconventional. I think we all enjoy variety, or many of us do.
It's a spice of life.
But for me, it's variety within the confines of what I call the sales arena.
Yeah,
I'm just
you got
passionate about sales. Yeah, right. That's what I really enjoy, is those go, no-go decisions that customers have to make, and the degree to which a salesperson can guide their customer to making the best decision for the customer.
Right.
But within just that little niche, right? Go, no-go decisions that customers have to make, and how we as salespeople guide them there, that little niche is infinite.
Yeah.
Because every human is different. Every selling scenario is different. Every offering, price point,
product,
value prop. It's all. So it's an infinite yet tiny niche, but one that is desperate to be optimized.
I feel like you subscribe to the notion that there is no one size fits all philosophy when it comes to sales. Like we just had, I had a group of artists on recently, and that was the thing that we talked about was, and seeing these parallels is kind of the whole point of the podcast, is to sort of like draw these lines between, like, you would never connect a sales guru to maybe like bands and how they would choose to market or write their music or whatever. And so to see that there's like a lot of artists who are like, hey, I like the way his voice sounds. How do I make my effects chain sound just like that? And people will be like, oh, just get this preset and you'll slap it on and that'll help you get there. But that almost never works because there's so many variables. There's like, what kind of cable are you using? What's the microphone you're using? Did you EQ things the right way? Did you compress or limit or do all these things in the mixing side of things that can kind of actually make something like that work in the first place? So you see how this like lack of fundamentals in each niche little specific way can affect everything else down the line. Like your end result's going to be different every time. So the fact that you kind of have addressed that, it's like, yeah, there is no one size fits all approach to sales. You really have to take in mind certain things, right? There's certain things that stay the same, right? They're like through lines that will always be very similar, but the mode and the means of getting there is almost always going to be different because of all those other variables that are involved.
Gosh. Well, when you describe it that way, it makes it sound so hard.
But that's what makes you so good at it, I think, because you do take this like very unconventional approach. Like Heart of the Wolf is specifically tailored around like, the upside down secret. It kind of implies that like you would not expect this to be the way that it is. And that already kind of invites the idea that, yeah, like, because sales has been pushed in a very conventional, cookie cutter, templated kind of way, and you put it out there, and then what you lose in all the disconnect between reading between the lines and what actually is taking place along the way, it's like you're not really getting the full picture in that thing, so you can't really ever apply all of that in the same way. So you having this unconventional approach is probably, I'm sure it is really difficult for some people. Like, obviously it's difficult, right? If you're able to sell a book and reach, the Amazon bestsellers and do everything you've been doing, it's like there's probably a good reason for that, because people are, like you said, they're looking for a way to get around like, okay, what we're doing is not working. So, very product, or fact that, 10 years into somebody's career, he finally is having somebody come in and audit his sort of like total sales experience that he's presenting to the customer is proof that people are looking for something different and not even just different, but they want like the truth. They want like real clarity. And the truth is the part that's hard about sales, I would say, because you think it's one thing and you kind of get emotionally invested in it sometimes, right? Like you're like, this is just the way I've been doing it. How many times you run into somebody who's like, I've been selling this for 10 years or 15 years. Like, I don't need this or that, or, that can be the attitude. And sometimes if you're in a safe spot, yeah, that works. Like you can keep doing that. But like you said, his sales weren't, it's not that they were bad. They were fine. They were great. But you see this room for like, not only like optimal efficiency and like max ability to sell more and growth, but doing it in a sort of a genuine and a heartfelt kind of way. That was one of the things I took out of your seminar that you did at the Hyatt back in January. It was like, I'm working and I'm running around, but I'm also like observing and listening. And I have a roommate who has an ATM sales business, and he sells ATMs to different businesses, and then he helps them with credit card processing, yada yada yada. And he was like, I'm just having a hard time selling stuff. And this is like right after I did your seminar. So I was like, let me send you a Dropbox link. If you have like an hour and some change to sit down and watch this, I highly recommend it. And he didn't. And then lo and behold, 4 or 5 months later, he came back to me. He's like, hey, can you send me that video again? You were saying that you did like a seminar or something. And so yeah, I mean, you're in this kind of inevitable path. You are probably always going to end up in this position where you're able to sort of thrive and not rest on your own laurels, but, you know, stand up for them and express them in a way that hopefully helps them catch on for people.
Yeah.
You're a very interesting character. I miss having you around the office. Your energy is like big and infectious. I couldn't get enough of it. And it's just good to see that you're, you know, taking a slice out of life for yourself and really kind of going for it.
I'm really blessed to have the business opportunity that's there, the professional relationships, a family life that accommodates this, a wife who's very patient and supportive, kids that understand and are excited about what dad is doing, right? Like all those intangibles that come together and either make or break someone's success in the streets, right? Are we going to make it? And when we don't have that support at home or we don't have the right professional network, it's not that it's impossible, but boy, it's a lot more challenging.
Hill gets a little bit steeper.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you had mentioned, and I know this is your podcast, Johnny, but you had just mentioned that you had spoken with some salespeople that are trying to figure out, or I'm sorry, with musicians who were trying to weave sales into their profession.
Yeah.
Tell me, I'm just so curious to hear, what are the challenges that musicians face?
Listen, you're going to mess around and end up being my financial advisor and consultant whenever it comes to how we go and do this, because in the music industry, there's all the platforms are constantly shifting. Like music itself as the genres are always shifting, but then you come into like how bands market themselves. So it's very interesting because my exact first example of proof that, you know, there's no one size fits all philosophy for sales is completely just outlined and exposed when you look at the way musicians have to market themselves. So you go back to like the 70s and 80s where radio is really kind of the only way you're getting discovered or you know, shown to people. And back then it was, you know, the labels had the quick connections to a bunch of different radios. And so they would, you know, sign an artist and then they could put their singles on all these different radio stations and they'd spend some money doing it, but they were making money because the only way to get, you know, music was to buy a record or buy a CD or buy, you know, a cassette through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so when that went away with the advent of like streaming and the, you know, that early 2000s digital era of like Napster and people sharing music, the next thing that kind of came along that shifted things in the music industry was something like Spotify or Apple Music having like streaming online. So you didn't have to own the songs anymore. All you had to do was, you know, somebody has a catalog of sales, and if you're distributed to that catalog, people can listen to your music. So now it's like, how do I get there? Yada, yada, yada. And so then all these different platforms start to come up underneath it to say, hey, you can distribute through us. We have the connection to get your music up there and like 30 different other places that people stream music. Because globally, there's a lot of different platforms. And so sales as an artist, especially if you're unsigned, is super important because you need to, that's your revenue. And the streaming royalties from a place like Spotify, it's like 0.0013 cents per single stream. So it takes thousands of streams to make, you know, $10, $20, $30, you know, and you don't get them every month. You get them like every 3 months and quarterly statements. So a lot of artists rely on merch. And so recently, some of these platforms have figured out, look, merch is really important to these artists. We need to start having it so that people can purchase their merchandise online. So there's direct shipping kind of companies that'll take you can upload a handful of like pre-scripted templates or whatever and then sell them online. But then you got to push that store. I got to get somebody to go someplace that they don't want to go when they're listening to music. So how do I get them from the music place to this place? And you know, sell them on this shirt. Well, one, it comes down to like good apparel, good design, good quality fabrics, yada yada yada. But then you got to figure out again that gap to get people from Spotify to this platform, Shopify, to get them there. Well, eventually Shopify brokers a deal with Spotify that you can get a little merch tab if you have so many thousand monthly listeners or whatever. And then you can put your merch up there. But Shopify doesn't print merch. They just ship it. So you have to have an inventory. It's a place that basically intakes sales, but no distribution. So then some companies will do like distribution and that side of things, but they're really expensive. There's like a barrier to entry, and not a lot of artists can meet it because they're not making a lot of revenue off of the streams to cover that. And so we found, I have a friend who locally is by the grace of God, like he's fascinated by this. So he started an apparel company, and he's like, I don't print anything. He's like, I just market the designs that I come up with, and then they sell online. People find my site, or they go to any of the places that it's at. There's a funnel.
Yep.
So the sales funnel is like a huge, it's funny, sales funnel, the term did not exist in music easily 5 years ago, probably not even 3 years ago. And it is, everybody's like, it's a sales funnel. And that kind of sucks the lifeblood out of music and art, I think. But it is this sort of necessary evil if you're an artist trying to sustain a career for yourself financially. So there's these hurdles you got to kind of tackle. And so, he was able to set us up with an account under his name and run our merchandise through him. And now we have a merch tab on Spotify, and people can click and they can buy a shirt, or they can buy a t-shirt or a hoodie or a cup or a sticker or whatever they want that we can come up with from one of the companies that actually distributes. That we had to link these three. It's like a tornado of companies we had to link together so that when somebody clicks here and they go to purchase it, the money comes back to us. But it was not an easy process. And, that's just one of the things that bands have to deal with. And then when it comes to marketing, it's like, okay, how do we get people to want to buy our merch? Like, well, it better look cool, and it better, fit nice, and it better be a nice material. And, it's just it's a huge gambit to go through. So what were you curious about with the sales? I just went on that whole tangent there. Like, what's the sales thing that you heard? Is that what I was talking about? Right.
Well, it's so interesting. The reason I ask is, much like any other sales arena, when I think about musicians or artists, often it's, I'm going to create something beautiful, and it will be so unique and special that people will just fall in love with what I've created, and they'll buy it. If I build it, they will come.
Right.
And I compare that to an interview that I heard recently with Kevin Hart, the comedian.
Yeah. He's like a mogul.
Yes. And the way that he built his business was so unconventional for an artist, but brilliant in his approach. And it's a way that, my goodness, if all of us in sales followed his model over the course of our careers, we'd retire in half the time with 10 times more money. But do you know what he did? I don't know what you've heard.
I don't know the top down. I just know that he's very vested in, he's got his hands on a lot of different pots. I see him as an executive producer on some shows that I watch, which is like another good angle where I'll invest in this to get a return on the streaming down the line. He just diversified, I feel like.
He diversified, but here's what Kevin Hart did originally. And this is something I think every artist, every sales professional can appreciate, is when Kevin went and did a show, a comedy show, he'd walk into a club, next on the stage, he would have a little book. And he would ask anybody who attended the show that night that enjoyed the show to please just share their email address.
Yeah, he email list gathered.
He email list gathered from day one.
Yeah.
And he's been doing it ever since. And he has constantly maintained a direct line of communication, first through newsletters, then email, then he got their phone numbers and he started to text and tweet. But over time, that list has grown to millions and millions of people that have a direct connection to Kevin. So Kevin Hart understood that the customer wasn't only the comedy club that booked him or the television network that hired him to do a special. It was the end user.
Yeah, the people that are enjoying the experience.
And now when he's hired on, part of the reason he's often selected, according to the interview I heard, is because these media executives know that if Kevin's in their program, he's going to promote it through his own direct channels, and they're going to get way more engagement as a result of Kevin's network than they're going to get through their own network of customers.
Yeah.
So my question to you as a musician and every other salesperson that's at working trade shows or they're on stage in their own way.
Yeah.
Where's your email list?
Yeah, right. And for some reason, it is like a part of the echelon of important things that all artists should have. They're like, a lot of people recommend it because it does give you that direct access to that person. The other problem, I guess, is unlike in those situations, this is one of the things that would make this, I would say, maybe slightly different, is that we're also reliant on the content that we create being surrounded around like our brand and our identity. And then we have to have it not just the email list would be one angle of something we should definitely also always have. Like that is true. But then there's also this social media side of things. And that's where I feel like a lot of companies come from the email side first. And then social media is just like foreign territory to them. It's like dystopia in their brain when it comes to figuring out how they're going to like attack their social media. And most of them have no clue. So they're relying on creatives to help them figure out how to fit their brand into this visual space of, Instagram and TikTok and everything. So yeah, we have no email list. And other than I would say on YouTube, when we have subscribers, you've got access to their YouTube where people are spending time on their phones and you're catching them in a different way. It's not the same as maybe emailing somebody. So it's just a different avenue. But in the perfect world, I would think you would say, yeah, the email list also plus that, plus all the other angles of everything else you have to have. And that's the plight of the artist, is figuring out like when you don't have a lot of resources, how do you make sure you cover all your bases? I think what Kevin did that was smart is that he started at day one and he just let it accrue. If you can figure out a way to index that or even create an app for artists to index that, there's probably money to be made in that, where artists could, at their merch table, if you like the show and you're picking up a shirt, feel free to enter here. If you enter your email, they'll do like the gimmies to get you to sign up with your email, where it's like, yeah, we'll take 10% off your order. It's $5 off whatever t-shirt you want if you sign up with your email, and then you have direct access to it. I guess the artists are by nature usually neurotic, and so they're afraid that they're going to be bothering people. A lot of artists have imposter syndrome.
Yes.
So their big hurdle is,
we all do.
Yeah, for sure. And so when you feel like, why would they ever want to, they wouldn't want to get an email from me. I think it's like an emotional hurdle that they have, and not like a business-minded, smart thinking directive that they know they should follow. So it's funny if you think of it like the way you described it, I'm like, I am an idiot for not having an email list. But when I think about it from my end, I'm like, yeah, I'm not bothering a lot of people. And it's like, yeah, you got to bother these people with your art, because if they've given it to you, they've shown you that they like what you do. And if you could have faith in what they like, and that they have, good taste, and to some degree they might find you to be a tastemaker, maybe you should collect their email and stay in touch with them. So, okay, you've convinced me. Today is the day, June 20th, 2023. I'm going to start an email list for a lot of my projects.
If there's one takeaway, Johnny, that I hope your listeners have for this entire episode, it's that they find the courage to ask.
Yeah.
Ask for their contact information. Ask for their permission to stay in touch.
Yeah.
I am sure that every time Kevin Hart got up on that stage as a rookie comedian, where half the people weren't even listening to him and he might not have even gotten any laughs, but to have the courage to just say, folks, thanks for coming out. I would love to stay in touch with you. I'd be honored if you shared your email address so that I can keep you updated on things moving forward. That takes guts. I know it's easy to sit here and say, oh, right, we'll just start an email list. There is so much courage that's baked into that ask.
Yeah.
But you have earned the right to do it. And every other artist that's ever had the courage to get up on stage or publish something online or paint a picture and put it in a show, or you have the courage. That took a lot more courage than the courage it takes to ask. But it's just a different type of courage to make the ask.
Yeah. I feel like, actually, a Rick Rubin quote, a lot of artists suffer from that I don't feel like I'm successful kind of mentality. And so when you feel like that, you feel that can actually inhibit things down the line, like, and create some sort of like executive dysfunction when it comes to actually making decisions or executing on anything in the first place. And so there's this Rick Rubin quote. I'm totally butchering it, but to paraphrase, it's the second you release your art, you are a success. Like that, you've done the thing. When you've put it out there, that is the success. Everything else is tertiary. That's what comes after. But the success is getting your art completed to your satisfaction, battling your imposter syndrome and all the other hurdles you have, and then actually releasing it and getting it out there. And so that I'm in this very like perspective-based era of my life where when I can hear a unique perspective, that I'm not against challenging my own beliefs, I guess. And I think that that's like a fundamentally important aspect to maintain as an individual, regardless of sales or music or whatever you're in. And by doing that, it's been helping me sort of absorb this a little bit more. And so that's, the side benefit to having this podcast is I'm having a lot of people that are really talented come in and share like their lived experience. And there's, when somebody explains it to you in a way where they're emphatic and genuine about it, you're like, oh, okay, all right. No, he's right. Like I feel that he's right. And I don't know. It's just one of those things where like I feel like artists don't get a fair shake because they're not the business-minded individuals they need to be. And so that's the curve we're going through. But as we get there and more, so you start to see it manifest in the music industry where you start seeing artists that are like indie or unsigned artists that are getting like Grammys because they're building these followings. And so for us, it's about engaging with your audience. And what you're describing is that Kevin engaged with his audience. His audience wasn't the people that were in the club that night. His audience were the people that liked him so much. His core audience becomes the people that were so, infatuated with his performance or enjoyed his set or, enjoy the show he watched or whatever, that they went up to that book and wrote their email down and were like, yeah, like I'm a fan. Like I am your audience. What you're doing, I'm interested in. And then he created a direct line to be able to stay in touch with him.
There's a little adage in the business world that I often challenge my own clients to consider. And it's that 10% of your followers or 10% of your customers want to pay you 10 times more.
You say that to me and I'm not laughing because it's absurd, but I'm like, if it's true, I'm going to be pissed.
It's absolutely true. 10% of that audience that went and saw Kevin Hart, 10% of the people who buy my book, 10% of the people who watch your videos on YouTube, they want to engage with you and spend 10 times more with you than they are today.
Yeah.
The question is, what are we offering them?
Yeah, and the value proposition that you have to sort of offer as an artist, I think, is your art. And we, as artists, feel, and not because we're right or wrong, but we just are inclined to feel like that should be enough. Like if you knew how much blood, sweat, and tears went into this, and out of a group of maybe 5 musicians in a band together, if you're a solo artist, it's all on you. So you have to build a team around you. You actually have to have like infrastructure in place, like a team of people to help you sort of coalesce to the next level. Because at some point, bandwidth becomes an issue. Like you bottleneck, you're like, I have so much to do and I can only get this so much done through this little ring here. How do I grow? And it's like, well, then you have to start seeing who in your, it's almost like for us, we have to look in our audience and see who wants to be a part of it, who wants to get on the ship for a little while. Like, let's figure out how we can get to where we're trying to go. And with a company, you have that kind of infrastructure in place. So sales is different in that arena because usually it's not, that guy you went out with, was he the head of sales?
Head of sales. And
so he's training people underneath him, I'm assuming. He's got like
Correct.
A small staff of people underneath him that are people that report to him with leads and things that he's working on or they're working on to, generate for the company en masse. In a band, it's like you have to have all 5 people doing that. But, the drummer's girlfriend has got a little bit of a temper. So I don't know. Yeah, like there's always these so many different nuanced problems that are dealing. It's like it's the Wild West in the music industry when it comes to sales and marketing. But I don't know where I was going with that. I lost it.
Let me, there's safety in numbers. It's the Wild West everywhere, Johnny. I just talked to a guy who sells copiers for a living. It's the Wild West. I just worked with a disruptive investment banking company. It's always the Wild West.
Why is that? Why do you think that is? Because it does feel like that. And I'm sure everybody feels like that in their particular industry, right? You're like, anything goes out here. You're like, Mm-hmm. What is it about each industry that kind of does that? I guess because I do feel like that's commonplace. Everybody feels like that. That guy who's selling copiers feels like he's in a competitive Wild West market. I'm thinking like, who's copying anything? Like we all have cell phones in our hands and we can, but there's still that audience of people.
To this day, and probably through the rest of my lifetime, and since humans have been walking the planet, it's humans engaging with humans. We're not yet to the point where your avatar and chatbot are engaging with my avatar and chatbot, right? We're not in the matrix yet. And that's the beauty of humanity. That's the beauty of sales and business, is that at the end of the day, it's still people engaging with people. And there's nothing less predictable than a human. Right?
Yep.
So the best we can do is try to apply a bit of a formula, a bit of science to the art of sales or the art of music.
I love that you just called it the art of sales, because when I watch what you do when you're speaking at seminars, or I shot videos for the book to release, and just sort of observing you over the last it's been a few years, which is actually kind of wild to think about. That is definitely something that I look at you and I see it is an art. I think there's an art to a lot of different things, but I see you as a sales artist. And so that's very different than what you think of when you see the guy who knocks on your door and is trying to sell vacuum cleaners, like that, nostalgic evergreen image that we have from like the 60s and 70s for some reason. What do you think it is about your philosophy and approach to sales that sort of separates you from the crowd? Because it's not like you probably touch on a lot of common ground that other salespeople are familiar with, right? But there's something about the means and the way you go about integrating it to them. So it has to come from like your philosophical standpoint on sales as an art. So like, what is it about your version of that art that differentiates you from the people that are, door to door? At one point I was so broke, I was doing Cutco, vector marketing. I was doing knife sales.
Fantastic.
I'm so glad I got the experience. What a joke in hindsight. But, experience, you learn from it, right? So, and it was a very brief stint. So it's not like I was in it for 10 years or anything, selling Tupperware or anything like that. But there's something different about your approach. And I guess I kind of like to hear you distill it, because I feel like that's an avenue that a lot of people don't think that they need to change about, themselves, either internally, whether it's a company or as a person.
Well, you're kind. Thank you. There are a lot of people that I have just been really fortunate to have in my life that have served as guides for me. In fact, Greg Woodman, who I believe has been on
just had
your
on
podcast
last week. Yeah.
Okay. So guys like Greg Woodman, or my own dad, my parents, John Rogers, from the Dale Carnegie organization, even the Dale Carnegie books, Dan Miller, Don Miller. There are all of these thought leaders, some that I've known personally, others I've never met or talked to, or might even be dead, but I've read their books. So it's, if anything, what I find with people who have been successful in any asset of life or facet of life is that they have been good and inquisitive listeners. When someone comes along that you think might have an approach that you would like to have yourself or that you want to embody, it's just taking a moment to step back and say, okay, I'm going to learn everything I can from this person, which is, to your credit, that's what this podcast is, at least in part. It's an opportunity for Johnny to engage with thought leaders and absorb.
Yeah.
And to whatever extent I've been able to do that, sometimes by intent, sometimes by luck, there's a lot of people in my life that have been able to guide me. And I was probably insecure enough in my own abilities that I was desperate to learn and listen.
It starts from somewhere, right?
You're right. I didn't have the confidence that I already had it figured out. I still don't.
Yeah, isn't that the bitch of it? Like, right. I feel like when you feel like you're obviously super successful, you've managed like multi-million-dollar deals from several companies. Like it's like old hat to you. And you can still look at yourself and be like, I don't know if I've got it down yet. It's like, at what point do we feel like we figured something out?
Yeah.
And I would imagine it would come down to the point where you write a book about it, right?
I guess so.
That was a leap. I remember we're heading into the end of 2022. And we're filming some videos like, hey, let's film this video. This is the pre-release, like pre-order the book video. And then we're like, hey, you know what? Just for shits and giggles, let's just say you're Amazon's bestseller, like right after it comes out. Like, why don't we just record that video now so we have it? Wouldn't it be funny if we had it? We could put it out the same day. And we did it, and then it actually happened. So I was like, yeah,
it manifested, as my daughter says. Yes.
Yeah. How old is your daughter?
I have 3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. 21, 19, and 16.
Yeah, they seem like they're in the use the manifest destiny phrasing of life. But isn't it kind of funny that they're kind of pulling from the experience they're getting from dad and from, your upbringing of them, and then their exposure to like the things that interest them in life, they're pulling together that there is sort of something to this. Like, you got to believe that you can do it and really believe it. Like, not bullshit self-belief, not
Right.
fake it till you make it kind of scenario, but like you have to actually feel the investment that you have in yourself and your growth and your career and your art or whatever to get to where you want to go. And so to the degree that requires you to, manifest destiny, yeah, that's what you did. I feel like we did a little bit of manifesting.
Well, thank you, Johnny. We manifested the Amazon bestseller
and we nailed it.
and boom, it just happened.
Yeah. That's all we had to do was manifest it. And there wasn't even that much work that went into it behind that. Yeah. But you were, that was kind of a timid place. It felt like you were in a place where you're like, you were on high. You were like, you were batting on all cylinders because you were excited, but obviously nervous. And there's a lot of, it's your first book. So it's like, how's this going to do? Like, what, all right, what's this new foray I'm about to jump down into? And I mean, it was a fun experience to watch because like, it almost kind of inspired me to maybe write a book someday.
I see one on a future shelf right in this studio.
Yeah. And your local Goodwill for 35 cents. But I just remember being like, it was electric in here for a few weeks because it was like everybody was like, it's getting ready, it's getting ready to happen, we're getting ready to do it. Chris was like frantically like sifting through things, changing this logo, shifting this, and doing all these things. And in that madhouse, it's like I feel like that's what's going on in my brain whenever I'm creating music or whenever I'm coming up with an idea for a podcast or whenever I'm shooting video or conceptualizing a short film I want to do or something like that. Your book has been going really, really well. Have you had people reach out to you since it dropped, like that you knew personally that have read it, that you were like, hey, this thing is actually fire. Like, where did this come from? This has been inside you the whole time.
It's been humbling to receive as much feedback as I have, especially from the people who really shaped me in writing it in the first place, good and bad. Right.
Yeah.
I think the reason I wrote it and what has been so helpful in the feedback is after 30 years of just beating the streets and being a sales guy, I began to discover that I was making the same mistakes over and over again. And I saw other people making the same mistakes that I had when I was starting. And I'm thinking, I could be selling Yellow Pages or technology or software or contractor services. Pick whatever it is.
Yeah,
that
what
you're
haven't
selling.
you
Doesn't
sold
matter.
at this point?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. There are so many common threads that separate the elite 3% from the lagging 97% of performers. And I had to get it out of my head.
Yeah. You said a stat that it screamed at me at the seminar, and I can't remember, like, it was like, what percentage of your X percentage of your sales is coming from only like it's like over 50% of your sales is coming from like only 10% of your workforce or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And I can't remember what that exact stat was, but I remember being like, thinking that a small group of people, like if 1 in like 10 are the people that are really selling 50% of your company, then what are these other 9 doing? Could they be doing better? Is there something they could be learning from if they weren't compartmentalized or like, so the book is Heart of the Wolf, the upside down secret to manifesting destiny.
Close enough. Yes.
To becoming a kick-ass salesman or to being a kick-ass salesman. Is it becoming or being?
Doesn't matter.
It's both.
Yes.
How does that relate then to the sales community? Like, what would you say the upside down secret is?
In as few words as possible, it's not about you.
Ooh.
The upside down secret is that the most successful salespeople that I've ever known, and when I think back to the moments when I've been able to ring that bell, it's because I wasn't focused on my own success or my own company. I was all in on helping that customer drive the most success that they could and asking myself day in, day out, how can I enable their success? Now, to be clear, not in a Mother Teresa way, not in a I'm going to just give you all my money and work for free kind of way. In a way that says, if Johnny, if you're my customer, I am all in on driving success for you. And I know that there's value in doing that. So if I can help you become a platinum selling artist, guess what? We're both going to win.
Yeah.
But when I was convinced that I could help Johnny become a platinum selling artist better than anybody else could, and that I had a track to get there, that I knew if Johnny and I combined forces, we're going to win, then I was going to get that sale.
Yeah.
Every time. And same goes for the other people I know that have long-term sustained success and fulfillment in their selling career.
And so you're saying, like, in a way where, like, even if they're already kind of successful, like, you still think you can, like, help them grow? Like, that last sentence, repeat that last sentence for me.
The people I know who have success, I'd say in an outward way. Where are they on the sales rankings? Right. Are you number one in your company?
Right.
But it's not just that kind of success. It's true fulfillment in what you're doing. And what I mean by that is I do know some sales professionals who are atop the leaderboard and they're miserable.
Yeah.
Because they've gotten there, but often at the expense of their customers, as opposed to through the success of their customers. And if there's a mistake that I see leaders make in business all the time, it's when they put their head on their pillow at night or when they really start to think about their business, the question they ask is, how can I be more successful? How can my company be more successful? Instead of asking ourselves as leaders, how can I make my customers more successful? How can I make them more money? How can I help my customers reach their goals? That's the switch.
Yeah, it's one aspect is you're trying to draw out of your customers because they're a source of revenue that generate for you, and that's monetarily maybe what makes you successful and meets a benchmark. But what you're describing is more, look, they already have needs. Odds are, if you're selling something they need to buy, you can that should be an easy sell. But what you're trying to do is trying to help them succeed through what you're selling them and how you're getting them the access to the resources that they need or whatever it is, whether it's, an actual product or something else. That's a very interesting approach because it literally almost sort of begs the humanity aspect of sales, right? Because you're like, if you're focusing on what I can generate, what I can ingest, and what I can get in, it's really hard to think about what the customer actually needs or wants. And if you looked at that from that angle, you actually might be able to see there's an audit that could be made to what I'm doing here that could actually be a better approach. It's better for them, maybe less stress on me, more fulfilling. Like you were saying, like you basically want to walk out of the day and be like, man, I did it. I solved so many people's problems today and I made bank while doing it. Like I didn't do it for free. Like you said, I'm not a saint, but I am doing it in a way that's fulfilling. And to do that, you had mentioned at the seminar, actually, to just sort of speak to one note that I really remember. You were saying that, like, if you talk to somebody and you ask them, like, I don't know if you asked them who they were reading or something like that, but if you like, I saw this book the other day and it made me think of you. And so I got it for you because I think you might enjoy it. I'm not sure if you're a big reader, but I just saw it and it made me think of you. And you just give it to them, regardless of whether or not they throw it out or keep it. The very act that you showed them that you actually cared about what they're going through or doing or experiencing is huge to them in terms of connection between them and you. And I think that's going to be a better ticket to a more fulfilling sale than the latter of just being like, I've got these things, you need these things, why don't we just do the exchange?
A great sales mentor whom I don't know personally, but I've followed him for years. His name is Jeffrey Gitomer. And Jeffrey Gitomer encourages salespeople to, as he says, lead with value.
Yeah.
That first time that we reach out to a customer, instead of calling up and saying, hi, Mr. Customer or Mrs. Customer, can I come in and tell you about my really cool company? Ugh, that's gross. To instead reach out and say, listen, I've done a little research on you and people in roles like yours. And what I've heard is that seems everybody is struggling with this problem, whatever it is. And I read this book that I thought might help you solve that problem. So here's a book. That's leading with value. And that's one of 1,000 examples. But when we can lead with value and put ourselves in the customer's shoes and really think about what their challenges are and how can we help them, it opens up so many doors that otherwise are just slammed shut before we even knock on them.
So we're kind of experiencing that in the music community right now, where, if you're an artist, you're trying to sell yourself, you're like, listen to my band. The problem is there's on a strong day, there are like over 60,000 new songs being uploaded a day.
Wow.
We're talking terabytes of songs every day. And so that's a sea of music, and it's easy to get lost in that. So how do you stand out, right? And so when you're trying to create value and you have an app like TikTok, for example, the artists have started to do these things called hooks, where they get you in the first like 2 seconds. They're like, hey, if you're going through a breakup, I wrote a song about this and I think you should check it out. And so, and maybe not in those words, maybe something more poetic than that. Mm-hmm. But the concept is you get them in like, hey, if you're feeling angry and you're about to go to the gym, this is a song you want to jam, and you play some high energy rock and roll right behind it. That's like something that people are like, yeah, I do. And in TikTok, it kind of feeds that to people that are interested in looking for those kind of things. Mm-hmm. And so by having this hook at the beginning and then your song right behind it, if your song is good, that's how you get traction. You've done the value up front. You've given, that's that version of an exchange of that leading with value is like, hey, if you're going through something right now, just know that we've been through it too. We wrote a song about it. Why don't you check this out? And then go into the song. So that is sort of like the lead. It's not the same as obviously giving somebody as sentimental as a book or anything like that, but it's like the thing that you can do as an artist to sort of show the value or explain the value that you're trying to provide to the people that you want to be your customers, but you're really just, you want to be your audience and your fans. And so I am sort of seeing that lead with value proposition taking place, because a lot of artists are like, try to be stoic and very like mysterious. And it's a trope at this point. And so it's one of those things where it's like when you're trying to sell yourself as an artist, that's really, really difficult to figure out which of these avenues that you might be discussing might apply to the artist, scenario. And I can see that idea of leading with value taking place in that TikTok space in that regard. That's like one example that I can think of right now off the top of my head. But it's interesting to put it that way, because I feel like artists are really disconnected from realizing that that's the service they're providing is they're putting your art out in the world. The service they're providing is, if you play it right, the music you put out there connects people like a web, and you create a network of people. Ultimately, when you play a show, your best show is going to be a show where the majority of the people there are there to see you and are singing every word because you wrote something that touched something in them. Mm-hmm. Music is kind of different, right? It's more ethereal almost in the way we kind of approach digesting and absorbing and paying for it. But it is still sort of like it gets almost treated like a commodity all the same, because it is, it's like music streaming platforms are a thing. So it's funny to see the parallels between your sales world and mine, because that's what we're doing. We're ultimately just trying to sell ourselves. If we want to be successful, we need to do that.
Yeah. And
so what role do you think then collaboration really has in this world for you then? Because with sales, you do kind of, you're going out on this company and they're auditing your sales approach. Are you auditing theyrs? Mm-hmm. What do you do after you? So take me back to the story. This guy's been doing it for 10 years, and you're out there watching you're watching his show, and you're like, okay, all right. So I digested some things. What were some things that you noticed that you were like, hey, we got to tweak some things. Mm-hmm. You might want to tweak some things. It's not like this, what you're doing is not working. Clearly it is. You've got a track record, but I see a lot of room for improvement. How do you show somebody like that the lead with value proposition to kind of help them adjust?
I heard something really interesting recently, Johnny, about millennials. Now, different generation, right? Not mine, but that the millennial generation, a lot of these folks have grown up always earning the participation trophy in life, right?
Yep.
You're the best. You're great. You're going to be fine. Aren't you special? Aren't you wonderful? And what I heard is that in today's world, that millennial generation that grew up under that premise, they're not looking for praise. They're looking for feedback.
Yeah. You know why? Because they didn't get any.
Exactly.
You're totally right. I did not look at it like that, but that is absolutely the obvious correlation, right? Like,
Yeah,
you didn't get feedback because you were never told you suck. You need to maybe fix this a little bit.
Right.
There's some tweaks and adjustments you should make.
And the challenge is, and I'll just speak to the sales ecosystem for now, but the challenge and it may even apply to music, is that so many salespeople that are from that millennial generation now, they've never gotten real, I'd say, positively woven but constructive feedback.
Yeah.
And so you know where they get it. The hardest place of all, which is on the street when you first go out and try to sell something.
Yeah, the school of hard knocks.
Yeah, they're getting their teeth kicked in.
Yeah.
And they're crumbling, as we all do. I mean, if we have any sort of empathy or pride, it's very hard to hear no, or a strong and aggressive no, get out of my face. I'm not interested. Leave me alone. Don't ever call me again. Right. Those things are very hard. Even more so when we're not accustomed to ever having heard them before or being challenged in that way. So taking you back to the story, when I was out with this millennial who had been selling for 10 years and doing a reasonable job, I found what I considered to be some very fundamental and basic areas where he could improve his approach. And not in 10 years had anyone ever offered them to him.
Yeah.
Now, in the business world, what often happens is you'll have a sales manager that does what we call ride-alongs. So your boss will get in the car with you and go on some appointments with you and give you some feedback. And that's wonderful. It's better than nothing.
Right.
But often the person who's guiding you is a person who's been in the same business as you, working at the same company as you for a very long time. So their perspective on what works and what doesn't is very myopic.
Yeah, certainly.
Right? It's just, well, this is what we... In fact, sometimes they end up teaching you bad habits because they're the habits that they've had.
That's the first thing that's the same thing with music. They're like, if you learn from your friend instead of going and seeing somebody who knows how to teach you the rudiments of something, you're going to reinforce a bunch of bad habits that are going to take you time to unlearn. You're going to have to learn how to do things the right way. So I mean, that principle still applies. It cross applies.
So I think back to number one, the company that has been meeting this salesperson's payroll for the last decade. How much have they paid and how much have they invested in a salesperson that on a scale of 1 to 10 was probably executing at a 6? How much more success could the company have earned if he had been executing at a 9?
Yeah.
And then from the customer perspective, how many customers said no that should have said yes and could have gotten so much more value and moved their business ahead if only they'd better understood the value that this man and his company represented in the first place.
Yeah.
Like there are so many missed opportunities that just drive me bananas.
Yeah, I believe it. I'm seeing it.
Yes, right. But that's the rub.
Well, there's a skills gap, right? Like you've got this generation of like upper tiersmen. The other problem would be you've got this upper echelon of salespeople that have been in the industry for 30, 40 years that are going to retire.
Yep.
And those positions were not always very audit savvy, and that, you weren't able to really kind of get in there or have them really top down, them explaining their style. But like you said, if they've been at the same company for 30 or 40 years, they've got a really myopic perspective on what's going to work for their company and not something that's going to be progressive enough to kind of keep up with the way that people are digesting things and the way that sales is changing. So, and I'm seeing that a lot in these industry videos that I've been doing for KCF is that, you've got some guy who's been a millwright at the facility for like 40 years. He leaves and it's like, after he's gone, there's who's filling that skill. Now you've got this younger generation coming in, and you're like, how do we get them integrated in a way where they know what they're doing and also can adapt and learn? And speaking from the millennial generation, I did not get the participation trophy phenomenon. I don't know how I escaped it, but I remember in 3rd grade, we did a field day and everybody was out and everybody wanted to get ribbons, and there was only 1st, 2nd, and 3rd.
All right.
I busted my ass to get 3rd, and I was just happy to get there. But I was like, you know what? Like, I felt bad. You'd see kids crying at the end of the day because they didn't get one. And so that was a visceral, like, probably I'm unlocking some core childhood trauma right now. But in that experience, I remember there was another field day where I didn't get one, and I was the heartbroken one. And that was good for me because I was like, well, like, he is really fat. Ben is really fast. Like, he's got these lines cut in the side of his head. And I think that gives him aerodynamics and speed.
Right.
So,
Yep.
but yeah, so I don't know. I just feel like it's interesting to think that people don't see that from inside the company, right? Like you would imagine, well, I guess they are, right? If the new awakening of salespeople in the art of sales world is starting to, coalesce and open up and get a little bit enlightened, they're going to see like, hey, some people have tips, tricks, nuances, a different philosophy, just something that is going to be able to help us shift something. I guess if you look at your reports long enough, you're like, we're being stagnant. Like, what's the value of Ben Lawrence coming in and talking to their company if he can get that 6 to a 9, and he's been at a 6 for like 10 years? Well, your value of getting him up to a 9 has now increased his value, but what's that make you worth? Because you just basically overnight are able to kind of implement some new practices that'll help him get there. Do you feel that you get a lot of pushback from people that are like, is it hard whenever, I would imagine that it's hard for somebody who's been doing something for 10 years to be told, hey, I'm here. Like, did he hire you to come in and audit him because he was looking for like personal self-reflection and please help elevate me? Or is it like
No.
his company was like, right.
Yeah.
So in the context where the CEO or the COO is like, hey, we got this guy coming in. We're just gonna do a little revamping around here. Nobody's losing their job. We just want to see what we can do to collaborate and get some things elevated here. Do you get received well from the sales manager perspective whenever you're like, all right, well, here's some things that I noticed?
Well, there are two pieces to your question.
Yeah.
Right. And it's really how do we engage an organization in a coaching program that's really going to elevate their salespeople? The first mistake that I see a lot of companies make is that when they think about sharpening the skills of their sales team or elevating the team's performance, the first thing they want to do is they want to take a guy like me who is a professional coach in that arena, and they want to stick me with the losers. And I don't mean to offend anybody, but and I say this with respect, and this is a message to sales leaders: forget the losers. And I say that because if you have someone who on a scale of 1 to 10 is a 3, and if I or anybody else comes in and performs an absolute miracle and we double their abilities, they've gone from a 3 to a 6. Whoop-de-doo.
Yeah.
That's nothing. But give me someone who is already, or maybe just naturally, give me someone who's already a 9. And we can take that person that's a 9 and we can sharpen them to a 9.5 or a 9.7. From music, what's the difference between someone who's a 9 and someone who's a 9.9? Yeah.
I mean, it is observable.
It's that time. It's
the devil's in the details. You'll notice a cleaner guitar player who's
I'm sure
sound clean.
I live in State College, Pennsylvania. I went to a concert a couple years ago. It was called the Rock the 80s concert. And there was a guy playing electric guitar at that Rock the 80s concert, local guy. He was out of his mind amazing. He was so good. I couldn't believe it. I'm sure he was at least a 9 on that 9 to 10 scale.
Right.
Eddie Van Halen was a 9.9. So let's look at Eddie Van Halen's sales and his revenue stream versus the guy in State College who's a 9. And that's what I'm saying is in the world of sales, it's all about taking the people who have a natural inclination and turning them from minor league baseball players into true major league superstars.
Yeah, I think we missed an easy reference here of turning the knob from 10 to 11. If you turn it all the way up to 11, I think actually, I would argue that there can't be necessarily a linear thought process in doing that. In that maybe the workload that a sales group of people might have, the person who's operating at the 3, I don't know what that actually looks like functionally. I would have to see this audit sheet laid out so that you got a bunch of checks and lists so you could kind of like actually kind of dial people into a box, because you kind of almost have to be able to see whether or not the things that the 3 needs to learn to get him to a 9 is it that much more, or is it just that would depend on industry, I guess, and product and a bunch of different things. But I see what you're saying. I guess, yeah, if you're fundamentally
depends on attitude.
Yeah, true.
Who's the person that is always on time, eager to learn, asks good questions, cares about the company, cares about their customers, that's a 9.
Yeah, that's somebody versus the guy who's like, oh, we're at this meeting again, and they got this guy coming in today. He's like, he's already complaining about the situation that's taken place before he's even gotten in and met you. Like, you're some ethereal creature that's going to pop in and just ruin his day. And you pop in, it's probably twice as grating to them that you show up and you're like all smiles and like energetic. They're like, oh, great. Now this happy son of a bitch is here. But you're right. Yeah, I guess to that degree, I can see that. Yeah, if you've got a 3 to get him to a 6, the barrier to entry there is going to be so much steeper and more difficult than it is to get the person, like you said, who's already naturally inclined and interested in doing this thing.
The person who's a 3 can be a 9 somewhere. They're just not on the right bus.
Yeah, and I feel like that's also a byproduct of some people do a job that they can get and not the job that they want to do. Not a lot of people pursuing their passions, not a lot in writing Amazon bestsellers right now. So that's not true. There probably are a lot of people writing Amazon bestsellers. But in that and in that context, there's not really much you're going to be able to do to kind of save them from a spiteful disdain for the career that they find themselves in that they don't want to do. When did you kind of feel that sales kind of became your calling? Where did that kind of come from? What is it? I'm trying to wonder, like, where does this journey start for you when you first get into it?
Wow. How did I get into sales? I think I got into sales like most people, which was with an extreme degree of ignorance. I didn't really know what it was, but it just seemed like something where I liked people and I enjoyed engaging and meeting new people, and sales. Someone along the line said, Ben, you might want to look into sales. So I looked into sales. And what I've learned, I think what keeps me in the game is knowing and seeing how directly you can impact your customers' success. Like when you work with a company that you know can help its customers, to be on the front line of guiding what's often a reluctant prospect through a journey that leaves them in a better place than they were. And they're grateful for the effort and sacrifice that you made, even their objections that you had to overcome in order to get them on the bus in the first place. Right. There's an extreme amount of satisfaction that comes from that.
Yeah. David and Goliath, right? You're like, no. You're going to see. You'll understand.
Trust me. Yeah. But sales it's a career path where you can really be on the front lines of inspiring others to take action in ways that they might not think they're capable of doing.
Yeah.
It's evangelism in a lot of ways.
It really is, yeah, because you're speaking to the parts of them that are almost resting, right, and not really having the faith.
Yeah,
and so to put it into those terms, I guess I feel like salespeople have this bad rap, right? I think you think of a salesperson, you think of a car salesman or somebody who's going to be like kind of just greasy and slimy. You're like, look, okay, I got to get a car, and so clearly you're going to try to. This is a whole different shenanigan that I'm dealing with. But from your perspective, what I notice is like you have approached it from this like I said, like a very humanitarian approach. The objective for you is I can really help these people. I'm going to get paid for doing it, but I'm going to be able to really kind of like help these people. They're going to overcome obstacles that they don't see that they're dealing with. I imagine now that you're in this like consulting phase of your life, you're really kind of able to really absorb it more internally because it's you doing it, not like you working for another company doing it for them and helping their customers. It's like who else can I help? Because you've got this ability to sort of get in and sort of reverse engineer where maybe problems are stemming from, or like you can look at probably a list of papers and be like, oh, well, it seems like regardless of what the trends and stuff are, like, let's see what's happening on the field. Like what's happening down here that's actually like tangibly pushing or hurting your sales. Yeah. And then you can get in there and audit it. Like it's like a puzzle almost. I feel like you're enjoying like taking it apart, or maybe like putting one together for them and showing them like what they're missing in their puzzle that would help them complete a picture that would, ultimately elevate their company, elevate their sales, workforce. And I guess from my perspective, I always look like when I hear salesman, I think of like door-to-door guys or something like that. But in this capacity, it's not that at all. It's a very, it's like you're kind of offering like a homeopathic approach to like analyzing what it is somebody's sales force is doing that they could be fixing and doing more of. And that's got to be a really interesting landscape. And like you said, probably, you feel super fulfilled at the end of it because you've actually helped them. Did this company that you went and did this, the guy that you followed that was doing it for 10 years, what were the notes you gave him? Were you able to turn him around? Is he now successfully a 9 or?
Time will tell, right? But no, I am sure that he's going to apply some of what we covered. And back to your question, because what I hear you just saying, Johnny, if I heard you correctly, is the question of why do salespeople have such a bad reputation, and how do we change that? What are the best doing?
Well, I think podcasting certainly helped, right? Media representation is certainly going to be a part of that. And for a while, the door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman and the car salesman, those are trope characters that you see in media constantly. So there is sort of a preconceived notion that's built in that way. But with the advent of podcasts and audiobooks and things like that, it gives you the opportunity to kind of hear it straight from the horse's mouth. Yeah. And I think that that's a big shift in the perspective. If you are somebody, everybody is realizing whether or not they want to be, if they are selling or they're in businesses in any capacity, they need to also be a media company. They need to also be working on sales. Like, how are you getting people to be involved with your company? I mean, whatever that capacity is, you're in those avenues, whether you want to be or not. So it's you're either executing or you're not at the end of the day. And so your company growth is ultimately on your ability to see the actual tasks that you have before you to take care of, to grow and be in a successful company. And so I think for me, hearing you speak, I hear you on the phone downstairs all the time. You'll just be like, I can't describe. I'm going to have to set up a secret camera sometime whenever you're down there doing one, just to show people. But you're very energetic. And in the seminar sense, we were doing workshops, right? Yeah. Everybody was splitting into groups and they were kind of, can you go through some of what those examples were? What some of those workshops that we did in that seminar at the Hyatt were? Because I remember a lot of people being like, who do you think one of the things I said to Ethan, I was like, you keep trying to go after the guy who's working at this garage for people to be able to fix their cars with your ATM business so that they can swipe their card. But you're not going to the right guy. That may not be the right business, but also he may not be the right person. And so you said, you're not trying to get a hold of the wrong person to do it. You got to snipe the person that is actually going to be making the decision. You're trying to sell to somebody who doesn't have the authority to actually or not necessarily the authority, but the ability to say that this is the sale that's going to get made. So some of those workshops were really interesting because you could see it. I mean, I'm filming it, so I'm watching people's eyes and their faces in the screens as they're doing it. And you can just see some people being like, I feel like an idiot. I didn't see this. What were can you go through maybe one or two of those ones that we did?
Sure. Well, one of the biggest mistakes that we make in sales is that we end up selling into and calling on people who have the authority to say no, but not the authority to say what?
Yes.
Exactly. They don't have the authority to say yes. So your friend that is trying to sell ATM machines into gas stations, as an example.
Nail salons.
Nail salons. Often he may walk in and ask to speak with the manager.
Right.
Or the department lead or whoever he's trying to, or the person who runs the cash registers. He's looking for someone to talk to. My guess is your friend may be calling on someone who has the authority to say no, not the authority to say yes. Your friend probably should be asking for the owner and accept no one less.
Well, to lend credence to this story, he sold to one of the bars downtown and he was like, I went to the owner. Because I actually, one of the things that I actually told this specific one is the one that I had told to him. I was like, just watch the video. I was like, trust me, you'll take stuff out of it. And I gave him that one, and he came. He's it's funny because we're both always moving, and so we're never home together. He's my boy, but we're never together in the same place except for maybe sometimes at night. And he was like, hey, so I took that advice that you said, and I went to the owner of that bar, and I asked him if they could sit down and have a talk with him about, what I could do for them, for their ATM and their business. And he made the sale. So last weekend, his dad came over and brought his truck to help him load the ATM that they were taking down to that place and setting up. And I was like, that's awesome. So whether you know it or not, you're it's funny to think your reach impacting me now has impacted like a third party person. He's, 1 degree of separation, away from you, and still taking to heart lessons that you're out there teaching. So, and it wasn't one I would have learned if I hadn't filmed that seminar. So I'm really grateful that I did.
We'll have you film all of them, Johnny. Moving forward, you've got to be the guy.
Yeah, I love it. I want to get a little small team of people together to do it. Cause I really do have a good time. Just sort of watching you work. It's kind of like, it is watching an art. You're a maestro. Like you're not like running through gimmicks or like a scripted card. You're really kind of assessing what each person's doing and seeing how you can offer the value that they need to them. That's not an easy ask in a world where a lot of people don't want to make changes. So,
well, there's good news for all of us. The world is full of problems.
Yeah.
I've yet to find anyone who does not have problems. So if we can just fashion ourselves as someone who is as interested, maybe even more interested in solving those problems than the person who has them, the world is our oyster.
Yeah. It's hard when you don't look at it like that because you won't take the approach. And the approach has to be almost that mindset. Yeah. Because it opens the doors.
Yeah. Thinking about this, you referenced walking onto a car lot and the bad reputation of car salespeople. It can even be the same thing with bicycles. Can I tell you a little story about it? So just this past weekend, I think I really like to ride bikes, right? So I'm into bicycling and all that. Anyway, this past weekend, I walked into a bike shop.
I was looking to see if we were still charging your headlamp over here.
Oh, yeah, right. I walked into a bike shop and I saw a bike that looked really pretty. And it was in my size. So I walked over and I was just kind of ogling at this bike. And one of the guys in the shop walked over and he said, "Oh, you like that bike?" I said, "Boy, I think I do like that bike." So he pulls it off the shelf, puts it right in front of me. Now it's like we're gazing at this wonderful piece of art. And he immediately goes into a pitch about the bike. "This bike was designed by the greatest engineers in California, and it has these shock systems on it, and the shifting is it's the latest technology in shifting, and this thing absorbs 80% more shock than the previous version, blah, 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 blah."
Right. Rattling the facts.
To his credit, he's excited about the bike.
Right.
The mistake was he was not excited about me. Meaning he didn't ask me one question. Well, what kind of riding do you like to do? Or what kind of bike do you have now? Or what prompted your interest in this bike? Why might you be in the market for one? He made zero effort to ask me what prompted my interest or what I was looking for in the first place, and made the mistake that so many of us in sales make, which is we just jump right into the product demo.
And the jargon.
And he lost me.
Yeah. And it's a shame because he pulled it down and the next step could have been, did you like touch the bike? Because they say that in sales, if you can get them to, Apple has all of their laptops set at like 90 degrees so that whenever you go to like look at them, you have to touch it and like rock it back and feel that solid craftsmanship so that you're more inclined to buy it. They know that if you touch it, you're more inclined to purchase it. So I feel like just getting the bike down, he could have been halfway there, but he ruined it with the spiel.
He could have been. The trick, if it is a trick, but really the best practice is to get that customer talking about why they're there in the first place,
right,
or what their problems are, or why might they even consider something like this.
Yeah.
And to understand what prompted their interest. Why did I walk into that shop in the first place?
Right.
And build from there.
Is it funny to you to notice that you can probably not be in almost any sales position and not be critiquing and auditing the experience that you're getting from the customer side of things? You do so much to help the top down approach, but to be like at the consumer end of things, I liken that to like when I go to a show or when I go and I see a movie or I'm, somebody showing me their photographs. The first thing I'm doing is like, all right, this is the lighting. All right, this is probably what the lens was.
Right.
Like you just go into assessment and analyze mode and you're like, I almost don't know if I can enjoy movies anymore without being like, oh, that was a sloppy cut.
Yep. Totally. I'm in the same boat. Yeah. So when we're on the receiving end, it's so hard to turn off the coaching or the critiquing and just enjoy the experience.
So I wanted to follow up on the book. Did you end up doing the audiobook version of the Heart of the Wolf?
It is recorded and in production now.
Okay. All right. That's what
releasing very shortly. And the reason it's not out yet, it's all my fault, because the publisher asked me to read the book, which I did. And then they sent me all the audio files and they want me to listen at least once through it just to make sure I'm comfortable and did they miss anything. And the listening to my own voice, I don't know how you do it as a musician.
That podcast I had with a panel of artists, they were literally telling me how I need to do that. And I was like, I do so many things. That's the last thing I want to do is sit there and listen to my voice over and over again. Like, I found somebody I trust to go through listening to my voice and do it and have them do it. Is that the approach you're taking?
It can be challenging, but important.
Yeah.
And even in sales, there are times that I will just secretly record the conversation, or if I go back and watch the workshops that I deliver that you film, it's very hard to do. It's hard to watch yourself.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, to answer your question, the book, it's been recorded. The audiobook is coming out very soon. As soon as I can grit my teeth and finish listening to it myself. But it'll come out soon.
But you did all the recording then?
Yes.
Where did you do it at?
Right here.
That's what I thought. I remember that there was a recorder that was sitting on this table for a while. I was like, I come in the evenings usually. So by then you're either gone.
Oh, right.
And so I was like, is he doing this still? Is this still happening or whatever? Yep. And Chris was like, he's like, oh yeah. He's like, he's doing it. He's like, he's just chopping through it one at a time. Like he keeps going. How did you find the experience of recording it to be? Did you enjoy the reading aspect of it and walking through it again after you've kind of gone through the, creative writing, compositional phase of writing the book? Was it nice to go back and actually read it and see how it kind of feels going from text to
how
your
it flows?
Words? Yeah.
Yes. I really enjoyed it. And even reading through it to myself again, I was reminded of how, after 30 years, how freakishly obvious the mistakes are that most salespeople make, and how incompetent we continue to be.
Yeah, we love that ignorance for some reason.
It's very hard to break old habits, and it's also very hard to form the right ones when we first begin.
Yeah, well, like you said, if everybody's getting participation trophies and not getting the ability to kind of be self-auditing and learning every step of the way, it's really difficult. And if you don't have a good mentor or somebody to kind of walk you through your learning experience, I mean, that's where you can see the value of things like internships and things like that, where, somebody can be put in a position where they're maybe a little bit in the deep end, but what they're going to gain from being able to play catch up. But case in point, Carlos, my intern, he's running the Live Switcher right now. He's got tons of questions. And I've found that in my current incarnation of this leadership position, I enjoy being able to help him avoid the pitfalls that I've gone through. Like, oh, should we try this or should we do this? I'm like, I wouldn't do that. And here's why. Here's my example. But my approach is always, but I'm not telling you not to try it, because there's no one way to, write a song. There's no one way to create a music video. There's no one way to do anything. There's a million different ways to do this. There's a million different ways to sell. Some of them are going to be better for others, depending on all those variables that we've discussed so far. And if you can be, I guess, sort of introspective enough to be mindful of how you're threading your needle, you can kind of see what you're able to stitch together in the back end of everything whenever you see the full picture. And so seeing your book come out has got to be kind of like the culmination of your sales career and history, culminating into one book. Have you decided to do do you have a publicist?
Yes.
Have you been doing out doing any book tours or doing a circuit of podcasts and stuff?
We're doing some of that. Although, speaking openly, the book itself and I guess the network of folks that have already read it and the degree to which they've endorsed and shared with others, we're already to the point that we're barely capable to bring on anyone else.
Oh, really?
From a client perspective.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate. So now we're facing that next phase of growth.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, the book itself has become the publicist.
Yeah.
And I feel very fortunate in that regard.
I think it's a context that really travels well via word of mouth, especially when it's your word of mouth, right? Like nobody knows it as well as you do.
Yeah.
And I think to the degree that I saw a bunch of people in a room in a conference center, listening to the seminar that we did in January, it was really easy to see that. I mean, people were coming up to you afterwards and not, it's not to blow smoke, but like they were really grateful. They were like, I can't wait to take this back to my sales team. Like this was super helpful. And to get that many people in one room and have every one of them walk out of there being like, it's not like anybody went in there and didn't walk out with anything. They all came out with something that they're tangibly taking home. And maybe it'll take going to one or two more seminars before they cement other aspects of things that you discussed. But I think I'm a big believer in being in the presence of other people that are in the creative realm for me, or in your case, the sales realm, that are, ahead of the curve with what they do. Iron sharpens iron in that regard. Yeah. And so it's really nice to see that you kind of go out there and it's magnetic the way you, I want to say you're performing, but you're not. You're literally just like expelling this knowledge to them. And they're like, you can tell, like you said earlier in the very beginning of the podcast, you said they're hungry for it. Like they want to adopt better practices and grow and succeed. And it's really easy to do that when you've got somebody that can kind of matter-of-factly break it down like you do.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I've seen a big shift in sales over the last, I'd say 10 years, where in a lot of organizations, sales has become a data tracking exercise. In today's world, we have Salesforce, like CRMs or customer databases, and Salesloft, and different types of data-driven electronic tracking methods to follow a sales cycle.
Yeah.
And that's all well and good. I don't have anything against it. The problem is we have replaced the human-to-human selling experience and the investment and effort that business used to put into iron sharpens iron, that businesses used to put into growing their people. They're now investing those dollars into growing the data systems that evaluate sales performance.
Yeah.
And I think it's a mistake.
Yes.
I really do, Johnny. If we're not continuing to develop that frontline millennial, or it doesn't matter their age, if we're not continuing to develop the internal skills and beliefs and conviction of the person that's repping on the street, we're nowhere.
Yeah, I can definitely see it. It feels, it's almost like disingenuous to the person that they're selling to also, because there's like a disconnect between that sort of value that you're bringing still. It's like, oh, I can direct target somebody who has meets all these criteria online by looking at their analytics and marketing specifically to them. The problem is when you get out there and you turn around and you have maybe like a customer experience that's not positive and they want to reach customer support and they're reaching into the company to kind of complain about something. You have another group of people on the customer service or the sales side of things that are meant to kind of handle some of those intake calls that like they don't have the opportunity to explain things before somebody purchases something. Yeah. And so there's all kinds of disconnects that happen there. So it's like the data, being data driven is not bad. It just can't be the entire part of the picture. Like you're missing half of the picture if you're missing the human element, because the human element's what's going to ensure that the people that are purchasing, which are also humans, by the way, because they're the only people purchasing things, is you're losing that connection that they can have just to kind of hold it all together.
Right.
Yeah. Do you feel like we'll get away from that? I feel like there's got to be equilibrium at some point, right? Because sooner or later we're going to figure this out. Like if this book comes out now and AI is already the thing that AI is right now, there just seems to be like this pendulum swing that keeps taking place. And I think it's probably ongoing in life. But there's got to be this period of time of equilibrium where we figure out the human element is like the necessary element to have in there.
It's always going to be both.
Yeah.
We need the data and the analytics, and we need the humans that can perform and engage heart to heart with our wolf hearts, as we describe in the book.
So I know you have a call coming up here in about 6 minutes, so we got to get you off of here. But before we end the podcast, I just wanted to say, like, where can people find the book? Like, where is it located? What can people look forward to? Yeah.
Well, thank you. They can find it on Amazon. It's available there, prime shipping. You'll have it by the weekend. Easily. So you can get it on Amazon. For anything beyond that, our website is leadthesalespack.com. leadthesalespack.com. And from that website, you can buy the book, you can contact me directly, you can connect with our team and schedule webinars or workshops or coaching sessions or whatever is necessary to help your sales machine reach its next level.
At some point, I'm going to have you come in here. We're going to sit down and we're going to talk about how I could integrate your brilliant brain into the music industry. Because I feel like if I can just get you to conquer that real quick, we can get that platinum record on the wall. Well, Ben, I wanted to thank you for coming on. The book is called Heart of the Wolf, The Upside Down Secret to Being a Kick-Ass Salesperson. It's everywhere on Amazon. Thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. I know you're so busy, and I almost felt bad asking you to come on. But like you said, you have to ask.
You have to ask, and it's really an honor. Equally, I am so impressed with the degree of enthusiasm and professionalism that you bring. You are this unique mix of like rock star musician guy with tats on his arms, right? And you can thrive in a business setting and engage with people that may not have those same artistic propensities. So it's a very special skill set. So I will take you up on that offer to earn you that platinum record.
All right.
Now, what I'm not sure yet is whether we're going to do it with you as the musician or you as the guide to other musicians.
Content with either. I feel like both are totally possible, and I'm open to the experience of just going down that rabbit hole, to be honest with you. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I feel like when I started getting tattoos, I remember the stigma was, oh, if you have tattoos, you're never going to get a job if you have them below your elbow. And when I did it, I was like, I kind of want to break that stigma. Like, I'm a pretty well-spoken person, pretty intelligent, emotionally intelligent, socially intelligent. Like, I just want to break that stigma because it's such a small part of who I am, like the tattoos on my arm. And if anything, it's another version of artistic expression. So I appreciate you acknowledging that and that validation. Didn't know I needed that, but that's going to be a real pick-me-up today. Yeah, I think it's easy to see where I am really excited to do these kind of things. I'm excited. I was really excited to speak to you today because I just know the energy that you bring to a room when you step into it. So like I said, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to have you on again. I'm looking forward to having more of these in the future. We'll have the music industry discussion one in like a couple months. We have a single that's going to be coming out in October that we're doing. I can't really talk about. I'll talk about it off air with you.
We'll talk about it later.
But yeah, I could definitely use picking your brain on that one. And I'm looking for something really unconventional. And I have a pretty cool team of people that are some really heavy hitters. So I bet we could do some damage with the right philosophy and approach for how we handle getting ourselves out there. And I feel like you might be an integral part to that. You may have been there's always a reason, right? Like you meet people for a reason.
That's right. Well, thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Carlos.
Yep. Thank you, Carlos.
And
he's my Jimmy in the chair.
Thank you to everyone who made the time to invest and listen in our conversation today. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
We're always collaborating at all times with the universe.
That is a wrap on another episode of the Collab or Die podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed making this episode for you. And now it's time for our favorite part of the show, the part where I beg you to please hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you never miss an episode. And don't be shy. Give us a shout out on social media at Collab or Die Podcast on all the cool platforms to share your thoughts, your feedback, and your love. Until next time, Collab or Die, baby.